No, that's
Recording in progress.
and tell us we take our mask off. Yeah, I'm gonna tell them that we are taking our mask off. Okay. Good evening and welcome to our Education Roundtable with Stacey Abrams. I am Lisa Morgan, a kindergarten teacher and the current president of the Georgia Association of Educators. We are so glad you are here with us this evening. And before we begin, we do want to let you know we are following our COVID protocols, and we each took a test before we began this evening and we were negative. So for that reason, we are going to remove our masks during this portion of the program. This evening, we will be talking about public education in Georgia. The Georgia Association of Educators is the oldest organization for educators in Georgia, and we were the first to integrate in 1970. And we are very proud of that history, and we are telling that true history as we tell the true history of our state and our country. And this evening, we have with us educators from across the Southwest region of the state, and I would like to welcome you and allow them to introduce themselves and let us know where they work in their schools. We have with us classroom teachers, counselors, and what we call ESPs, extra special people, our education support professionals, the paraprofessionals, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, the school drivers. They are all educators to us, and we have all of those in our association. So our members this evening, we will start with Ms. Moore.
I am Martisa Moore. I come to you from Early County, Georgia. Early County, which is in a little town called Jakin. I teach in Decatur County. I am a 7th grade ELA teacher, and I am employed with Bainbridge Middle School. Good evening.
I am Sterling Brantley. I come to you from Colquitt County, Moultrie, Georgia. I work at Charlie A. Gray Junior High School. I am an 8th and 9th grade special education math teacher, and I also serve my system as an ESP as a bus driver.
My name is Jalen Murphy. I work at Harris County Carver Middle School. I live in Columbus, Georgia, and I teach 7th grade ELA.
I'm Daryl Carter. Good evening, first of all. I'm Daryl Carter. I'm a school counselor at Wesley Heights Elementary School, located in Columbus, Georgia, Muskogee County School District. And I, like Jalen, I live in Harris County, but work in Columbus. And I've been in education for 12 years.
I'm Vivian Brooks. I'm a retired teacher. I taught special education for 31 years. I taught in Houston County School System. I live in Warner Robins, Georgia.
Thank you. And now we would like to introduce to you our guest this evening. And we want to let you know that Stacey Abrams is the endorsed candidate for governor by the Georgia Association of Educators. And when we make those choices, it is our members who make those choices. Our members spent hours reading policy statements from candidates. We interviewed and actually spoke with all candidates. And then the decision was made by our members of who we would endorse. And we are proud to endorse Stacey Abrams for governor because we know that she is the governor who will put our students, educators, and all public schools at the front of the policy to ensure that we have great public schools in our state for every single student. Stacey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you all to the teachers and educators and the extra special people. Thank you to everyone listening tonight. I've spent the past week in South Georgia, started out in Effingham and Bryan County, went to Chatham County, was in Camden this morning, made it to Colquitt, made it to Thomas County, and then made my way here with a stop in Mitchell County as well. I spend a lot of time in South Georgia because I understand how hard it is sometimes to feel seen when you're in Atlanta. My mission is to not only make certain that our rural communities are served and Southwest Georgia is served, but that all of our students get the support they need. My plan for Georgia is centered around education because I am a proud graduate of Georgia Public Schools. I graduated from DeKalb County Public School in 1991. And I like to say that public education saved my life. It helped my parents break through poverty. It helped us recognize that working class poverty wasn't a permanent situation. It led me to college and grad school and to law school, and it brought me back to Georgia. As governor, it is my intention to give every single student in our state the same opportunities from cradle to career. That's why my plan really begins with early childhood education, helping prepare students for Lisa and for her fellow kindergarten teachers. It's about making sure that if you are in a rural school, if you are in a Title I school, if you speak English as a second language, if you have special needs, that we recognize that it is more expensive to invest, but that the return on investment is so extraordinary, we must make those choices. That means that instead of every 4 years, like clockwork, having a conversation about revisiting the education funding formula, under my administration, we're going to actually fix it. We do not need to study it any longer. We need to take action to make it so. And I intend to make that a priority as the next governor of Georgia. I also recognize that in the state of Georgia, starting teachers make less than starting teachers in Mississippi and Florida. Starting salary is $39,092. Under an Abrams administration, the starting salary by the end of my first term will be $50,000. And every educator will receive an average increase of $11,000 in my first term. These are investments that we should not only make in our educators, but in our ESPs. Everyone who supports our students deserves to make the resources it takes to take care of their families. That means that the state has to work in partnership with local school districts. There's the part that the state controls, but then there's the part that the local school districts are responsible for. And until we fix the funding formula and put more in, we will not get out of it what we need. We have a school bus driver shortage. We have a counseling shortage. We have a shortage across the board. And that can be solved if we do our part to lift up and support our educators. That also means allowing our educators to do their jobs as opposed to layering on more and more paperwork because someone had a bright idea on Thursday. I served 11 years in the legislature and I watched with horror every time we passed a new law, creating new rules and new responsibilities without ever adding the resources necessary. But worse, we were pushing parents and teachers further apart, and we were distancing our children from the actual education they need. I want to make certain that we center our children at the core of education and that we make certain that our teachers, our educators, and our parents are partners in this work, that they are not adversaries. And that means eliminating new laws like the divisive concept law that tells teachers they have to lie to children about our history. It means removing the law that says we will ban children from playing together. And it means making certain that we do indeed engage parents at every level of education, but we don't do so by creating an adversarial relationship between parents and the educators trying to lift their children up. And then when we have done our best in our public schools, I want to make certain that our public school children have an opportunity to thrive. And that is why I want to create apprenticeships, starting in vocational schools and starting with vocational programs so our students are learning and earning at the same time. That for our young people who want to go off to college, if they want to go to technical college, it should once again be free in the state of Georgia. And if they decide they want to go to four-year college, they should be able to rely on hope, but they should be able to access need-based aid. And we are one of only 2 states in the country that does not provide need-based aid. We're the only one in the South. But everything I want to do for Georgia, everything I want to do for Georgia's children, for Georgia's educators, for our future can be done without raising a dime in taxes. Georgia has the resources. We don't have to raise taxes. We simply have to raise our expectations of our leaders. I will tell you how we can do it. And I encourage you to visit my website to see my funding vision, because I learned in public schools to show my work. And so there is our website has a spreadsheet that tells you how we get it done and why it won't take a single dollar in new taxes to do what's right for Georgia. I come to this conversation with the deepest and humblest gratitude to GAE. I've watched these educators do their best for students, grappling with 20 years of austerity cuts, of layered responsibilities without the support they deserve. I've watched them struggle to take care of our youngest Georgians at a time when it was hard to take care of themselves. And I am here to celebrate our educators. But I'm also here to tell you I intend to be the public education governor for the state of Georgia. And I hope that I can convince you to help me get there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our educators have, we're going to make this true question and answer discussion time. And so we'll let Ms. Moore start.
So you spoke about helping us in the rural area. So I am from the rural area. How would your plan connect those educators and students so that we'll make decisions that will drive instruction for those students in the classroom?
The first responsibility is to recognize that for the last 20 years, we have underfunded rural education. When I say it's more expensive, this isn't hyperbole. It is the amount of transportation costs. It's the cost of recruitment and retention of educators and paraprofessionals and ESPs. It is about having access to the resources. It is of no use for you to receive tablets when the students in your classroom don't have electricity or broadband. And sometimes it's not a lack of broadband availability, it's their ability to afford it. And so we have to think about wraparound services for rural schools. And that means investing at the level that we know we need. This is not a mystery. Georgia knows how much it costs, but the challenge has been having leaders who are willing to pay the cost. And we are at a generational moment where Georgia, for the first time in my tenure here, has $5 billion in surplus. Those are dollars that can be allocated to invest in our young people. Now, my opponent in this race wants to give it back as tax through a tax scheme that unfortunately will privilege the wealthiest Georgians. My belief is that this is an investment opportunity. If we invest in our young people, if we invest in our rural schools, we not only create real economic returns on that investment, we lift up opportunity and we help the entire state thrive. And so my mission is to say that much like a house that has a leaky roof and a basement that floods every time it rains, not that anyone in South Georgia knows what I'm talking about, but when that happens, you can either keep patching the roof and keep bailing out the basement, or you can replace the roof and fix the plumbing. We are at a moment in Georgia for the first time in 30 years where we can afford to make those real repairs and make those real investments. And if we do so, the work that you do here in Southwest Georgia, the work that you do in rural Georgia will be work that we reward and work that we lift up.
Start just a second before you ask your question. For those of you who are joining us by Zoom this evening, we invite you to please put your questions in the chat and they will be sending them up to me and we will be asking some of the questions from our participants by Zoom. So remember to put your question in the chat.
Coming from the ESP standpoint, I spent many a year as an ESP before I became certified and still doing both dual roles this year. Many of the ESPs, especially the bus drivers and the monitors, struggle with not making enough money. How do you plan to go about creating a living wage for the educational support professionals?
So when I was in the legislature, I fought against a bill, and you all probably remember this, when they tried to eliminate access to unemployment benefits during the summer for our ESPs, especially for school bus drivers. We fought working with GAE, we fought and we defeated that legislation. But the reality is that starting about 10 to 12 years ago, the state started shifting the responsibility to local school districts, but denying them the resources they needed, and then forcing or at least convincing them that contracting out those responsibilities was the right answer. We can't solve our problems by hiding from them. And one of the responsibilities we have is to support our entire education workforce. And so while the focus has been on the fact that I want to do pay raises for our teachers, for educators in the classroom, I also want to make certain we are providing economic support for all of our ESPs, getting them all to a living wage. We've got to do that through the funding formula because part of the challenge is that for every dollar the state raises in terms of the current formula, we're asking local school boards to have to match those dollars, whether they have the resources or not. And so what I want to do is make sure we, first of all, right size the funding formula so that no one who works in our schools makes less than a living wage. That number two, that the state actually puts in its part so that especially our least wealthy school districts can afford to do what's right. And that means we've got to stop debating whether it's the right thing to do and figure out the way to fund it. And that funding mechanism should be a permanent funding mechanism. Only in times of catastrophe, like the Great Recession, should we have to slash the revenue and limit how much people make. That is not where we are now. We are flush with not only cash, but we are a fast growing state that if we invest now, the size of our annual revenues will actually grow enough to sustain changes to our economy and changes to our pay grade. And so I want to begin with the threshold belief that no one who works to serve our children should make less than a living wage in the state of Georgia. And I will work with local governments, with local school districts to make certain that the state is putting in its part and we can help local governments meet their part.
Thank you. And earlier you had kind of addressed the rural and a little bit about the ESP. Jalen didn't say this, but we have Jalen here with us this evening because this is his second year as a teacher. And we are thrilled he's here and we want him to remain as an educator. And that's one of the problems we have in Georgia, that almost 50% of our educators leave within the first 5 years. And we recently did some surveys that showed that 44% of all educators in Georgia are saying they're burned out and they're considering leaving the profession before they had planned to. So that's one of the things that I know you have a plan for that, but I hope Jalen will chime in there about some of the difficulties as those challenges that those of us that have been here a while remember, but as an early career educator.
Okay, this is my third year teaching.
I'm sorry. I
It's
thought it
okay,
was just.
every year counts.
Okay, yeah. Yes, it does.
Sorry. I think that as being an early career educator, I found myself in a position where I was considering, like, is this something I really want to continue to do? Everybody in my family has an education background, so I had to think for myself, is this something that I'm doing because there's a legacy for me in this profession, or is it because I really have a passion for this and this is my calling? And I determined the latter, but it took me some time to get there. And I think it was because I don't think teachers a lot of the time talk about, and I come from a family of teachers, and it was still a blow to the head when I realized just how hard teaching is. And I don't mean to say that in a way to garner like sympathy. I think that, for example, things like expecting more out of teachers without adequate compensation, expecting more without the actual resources that we need to get these things done. In my particular school district, we're kind of under fire right now because our test scores are a little bit lower than like they wanted them to be. So there's a lot of regulations that a lot of new added things, responsibilities that we have now to get the testing scores back up to par. And I think that the overall issue with that is that I think other people decide for teachers what's important for teachers to have and what's important for teachers to do without actually asking teachers what we need, or asking teachers how do we need to go about achieving the same goals that we all have, which is, for students to learn. But, I don't think people consult us before deciding what's best for us. If that makes sense.
It does. I've had conversations with teachers across the state. I was in Athens and met with a teacher who said, her issue is that she is given so many resources to teach, but not given the freedom to actually do her job.
Yeah.
That every time someone has a new idea, she gets a new piece of paper, a new piece of technology, and she loses more of her planning time. So she spends more of her time learning how to use the technology to help her do her job and actually using the time to do her job. And I think that is one of the challenges I saw when I was in the legislature, working with GAE, trying to push back against every new idea that moved us further and further away from solving the core issues. If you had fewer students in your classroom and had the resources that you need for those classes, if you had school books that your kids could use instead of having to share them, that if you had time to actually plan instead of having to do 2 or 3 jobs, either because the school is understaffed or because you are underpaid, then more could be done for our kids. And that's one of the reasons pay raises are so important, but that's also the reason I believe that we have to do more to shift ownership back to educators over their classrooms, reducing classroom size, but also increasing your authority in the classroom, working with parents, but also making certain that the administration works with you to do your jobs. We have a knee-jerk reaction to data as the driver instead of data as an indicator. Data should be telling us what we are seeing. It should not be dictating what we do. And unfortunately, we have shifted to a data, not data driven, but data dictated approach. And that is deeply problematic. And that is why, as governor, my mission would be to actually engage educators. We began this process with the priority schools legislation, which was supposed to, unfortunately, it was scrapped or at least went stagnant under the current governor. It was designed to go into those schools that were challenged with test scores. But instead of saying it must be X, the legislation required that there be a full analysis. Do kids have the wraparound services they need? Do teachers have the classroom supplies that they need? Do we look at the entirety? If you're living in a community where you have a high transient population, that might have some correlation to their inability to turn in their homework every week and every day. And so being intentional, but also making certain that you're resourced. A $125 gift card is insufficient to finance education for our students. And it is deeply problematic to me that we assume that that's a native good, that our educators should be responsible for providing supplies to students when they can barely provide supplies to their own families. And so as governor, my mission would be to make certain that we return to the fundamental narrative of education, that we have educators in the classroom meeting children where they are, helping move them where they need to be, and that you can love your job. Because when you love your job, you get to do your job. And that's the other reason for me, the divisive concepts idea is so problematic. Another teacher that we spoke to, she told me she was supposed to be teaching about the transatlantic slave trade in her semester, but she was terrified because she wasn't sure she could use any of the words, and that she was terrified that she would lose her job for doing her job, and that anxiety had her considering leaving the profession. We should not lose teachers. We should not lose educators because the state tells them to lie to children. And a lie of omission is the same as a lie of commission. I'm the daughter of 2 pastors, and they taught me a lie of omission and a lie of commission will send you hell just as fast, and they'll both get you punished. And so we need to have a governor who, instead of playing politics with education, actually empowers educators to work with teachers and to work with parents and to work with their students. I want to have this conversation in 20 years and for you to have a smile on your face about what you do. I don't want you to have to worry about whether you've made the right choice or think about the job, and you didn't use this language. Teaching shouldn't be a sacrifice. It is a calling. And our responsibility as state leaders should be to make certain that you can answer that calling. And anyone who does not feel completely committed to resourcing educators to meet that calling should not do this job.
I think we all agree. Yeah, we all want that. Daryl is a school counselor.
God bless you.
And one of the things that I kind of want to tie in here, I actually read yesterday that the estimate is that we have almost 6,000 children in Georgia who have lost a caregiver during the pandemic. And one of the things that we realized is that we must deal with the whole child before we can expect academic progress. And that's one of the things that has not happened in our schools. We went from, we're doing everything we can to prevent transmission of COVID to basically ignoring the fact that COVID exists. So that's something that is very, I think all of us sitting here today have lost someone to this pandemic. So it's not just our students, but it's also educators. And saying we're going to give you we want you to practice self-care, but not giving the time to practice self-care does not work. So, and that's just something that I don't know that there's an answer right now, but that is something that is front and center for a lot of educators.
Absolutely.
Yes, so on the mental health thing. Well, as governor, what resources would you use to make sure mental health is available to all our scholars in the state of Georgia?
Well, I think it's making sure they're available to the scholars and to the educators and to the ESPs. It's making sure that we actually meet our requirements as a state. Right now, although the best practice says that you should have one counselor for every 250 students, the number in Georgia is one for every 452, if we're lucky. And as you all know, in rural Georgia, that means you're sharing one in Early County, Stewart County, Colquitt County, Decatur County, and you don't know when they're going to be coming by your county to try to do the work. And I know that you probably face this every day.
Yes.
And so the reality is there is a way to, there are two pieces to this. One is supply and the other is demand. We keep talking about the demand side, but part of the problem is our supply side. We don't have a sufficient number of counselors and mental health professionals in the state because we will not expand Medicaid. When people hear Medicaid expansion, they hear health insurance for the poor. But let me take a second to explain what this is. When the Affordable Care Act passed, the Affordable Care Act was designed to shift the healthcare dynamic. And the answer was that because so many communities lacked health insurance, they were so reliant on emergency care that the way you shifted the dynamic was that you made sure everyone had health insurance. So you had more customers who could pay for services. The bulk of that came through the ACA, what we call Obamacare. But a big portion of it, especially in states that had a high poverty rate, came through what was called Medicaid expansion. The idea was that you had people who had healthcare here, and you had the poorest Georgians who had no healthcare. And in this piece, you had folks who needed healthcare but were too poor for the top and too wealthy for the bottom. And if you gave them health insurance, then they too could be customers who could then justify more practitioners providing services. But for 8 years, Georgia has refused to take the money. And so when we say no, we're not just saying no because you're poor, you don't get health insurance. We're saying no because you're poor. We won't pour in $3.5 billion into our healthcare process every year. If I'm a mental health professional and I know that I can go from having 2 clients to 20 clients, I'm going to open up my practice. But if I know I only have 2 clients, I can't justify my practice. I probably can't justify staying in this state. And so I'm going to go somewhere where I can. If we expand Medicaid, you suddenly have 500,000 Georgians with health insurance that they can use to reach out to mental health professionals. That means you have more people who are practicing mental health who then might sign up to be counselors, who then say, well, I can take my practice and I can add to my practice being a part of a school system. Or I can be on the list that can go to the teachers and the educators will know that they can call me and they can use their insurance, but I have enough clients in this community that I can use it. And so when we have a governor refusing Medicaid expansion, it is not simply about telling working poor that they can't have health insurance. It's saying we will not invest in healthcare infrastructure. And in Southwest Georgia, this is a crisis. Southwest Georgia has lost more hospitals, more physicians, and more lives than any other region of our state. When Albany becomes the #1 location in the world for COVID infections, which happened in 2020, then that is a telling sign about what we need. But we have to have a governor who removes the cruelty of saying no and understands the economics of saying yes. When Mike Pence and I can agree on something, it's probably the right thing to do. And Mike Pence expanded Medicaid in Indiana, and they saw their costs go down, their health outcomes go up, they have fewer hospitals closing, and more people have access. That's part of the issue. But the other part of the issue is making certain that we are paying people a wage that attracts them to providing these services. When you know that you've got to serve 450 kids on a good day, it's going to be hard to tell you to take this job. But when we can say that we're bringing in more people because we can offer a strong wage, then we can attract more people to provide these services. We can lessen your workload and increase your productivity and your outcome. And then for our educators, we create more space for you to actually notice what's happening with those kids. If we get more teachers in the classroom, if we can have more ESPs that are supporting you, then you have more time to actually focus on those students, not the ones who are waving their hands saying, I need help, but the ones who are so broken, they feel they can't wave their hands at all. And sometimes it's a colleague. And so I want to be a governor who says that we are going to invest not just wraparound services for the kids, but wraparound services for the educators, so that if you are in our school system, we know that you are in our care.
Thank you. One of the things that has passed recently was the retired return to work. And I know we all hoped that that would have a big impact on the teacher shortage in Georgia, but it has not. Do you have any inkling about why that might be before we talk to our
I
retired
could
teachers?
guess, but I'm smart enough that I'm going to let the person who actually knows the answer tell me. And then I'll respond and say what I think I can do about it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the problems is what was just discussed, the mental health issue. And it has increased since the pandemic. And a lot of the staff, bus drivers, teachers, the whole environment is being impacted by some of the mental health issues that the children have. And a lot of the retired teachers who used to teach have found that even if they substitute, they're starting to realize that children are not the same. And it's due to the emotional trauma that the kids have experienced. Absolutely. So I think not only does the emotional trauma that the kids are experiencing needs to be addressed by mental health services, but I think more is needed for the children on a daily basis to help make the environment where retired teachers would be willing to return. So I have some friends who are teaching half day, and they were debating whether to return because there were so many teachers that left. So back to retaining teachers, how would you address that, and how would you make it more appealing for retirees to return?
So I like to say I have a borrowed 16-year-old. My parents have been raising my niece since she was 5 days old. And in July of 2021, my dad had to have surgery. And so I asked my parents to come and stay with me for a few weeks while they recovered. Well, my dad recovered from surgery and my mom recovered from my dad recovering. And so I invited them to come and stay with me, and they brought my niece. She was 14 then. She is now 16, and they're still living in my house. We are working on an exit plan. But until that happened, part of the reason I asked them to stay longer was that she was starting 10th grade, and Faith moved to Georgia right before her 8th grade year. And so she moved in the summer of her 8th grade year, spent the first half trying to get used to being a teenager, being in middle school, and being in a new place, and then COVID hit. She spent her entire first year in high school behind a screen, and the second half of her 8th grade year. And when they moved to Georgia, they lived in Stone Mountain. And part of my contribution was that on Sundays, I would go and get her and she would spend Sundays with me. And I remember we were driving one day and she told me that she was excited about becoming a teenager because she was going to learn how to be a teenager on TikTok. And that was chilling to me. But because for her, she didn't have fellow teenagers to talk to. What she was learning about how she should be was coming from what she was seeing on a screen. And she's smart and thoughtful, and things have evened out. But in that moment, she encapsulated what so many of our young people had to deal with. They had to learn how to be young adults. They had to learn how to be teenagers on their own with parents who wanted to help. But I remember what I was like, and I've gotten to see, and I thank my parents for letting me survive to be 18 and 48 now, because I don't quite know how they did that. But what that means for me is, and what I think it means for this conversation, is that we can't simply declare COVID over and think that what happened is done. Faith is now 16 and we talk almost every day. And every day there's another moment where I realize what else she was missing or what else she needs. And I am lucky enough to get to have the resources to help her where I can. But I think about the parents who can't even pay attention because they're trying to keep their kids alive. They're grappling with keeping their kids in school and keeping their jobs. They are dealing with the same mental stresses, only they don't have health insurance or they don't have the capacity to use the insurance they have because they don't have anyone who can take the insurance. And if you're a retired teacher, you are coming back into a space where so much is going wrong and no one wants to tell you how to make it right. Now, there have been Band-Aids offered, and I don't want to diminish the fact that in recent days, there have been announcements about some things that the current governor is willing to do. But the problem is these are half measures for a whole problem. Putting money into healthcare centers and schools, $125 million is not going to cover all the schools that need that help. Medicaid expansion would allow us to put even more money into rebuilding our healthcare infrastructure. But it's also about making sure that not just do the children have that support, their parents need their support, their caregivers need that support. Retired teachers can't come back in and solve for a systemic problem. And we cannot solve a systemic problem with Band-Aid solutions. And what terrifies me is that if we do not use this generational moment, this upcoming election to set our goals for actual solutions, the conversation we're having in 4 years is a much darker conversation because it is much easier to grow strong children than to fix broken adults. And we have the responsibility and the opportunity. And so one way I think we can bring retired educators back into the classroom is by making sure we leverage them for the purposes that they could be most effective, making sure that they are co-teaching, that they're not being asked to take on entire classrooms. And if they're doing half days, that those half days are targeted so that they are using their skills to help those who need it the most, but in a concentrated and I would say accessible form. But it's also about making certain that the resources are available because those retired teachers also survived COVID. And it's making sure that they are equipped to come back. We have the ability to invest for once in this state in solving problems instead of sliding problems down the line, hoping that if we do just enough, we can get by. Georgia can't afford to get by anymore. We are one of the fastest growing states in this nation, and we are one of the hardest hit. And COVID is real. The long-term implications are real. And giving money to nonprofit organizations to help is a start. It is not a solution. We have to have wholesale investment. And if we do that, then we can not only bring more educators back into the classroom, we can keep educators in the classroom, and we can help whole families be stronger. That's the mission I have. And this is not about doing for others what they should do for themselves. It is about doing together what no one can do alone. And that should be the mission of the state of Georgia.
Okay, we do have some questions from our Zoom watchers. Okay, the first one is from Layla. Her question is about safety in schools, a major concern, especially with Kemp's new carry law. What will you do to keep us safe? She says, I don't want to have to buy a gun to go to work and feel safe. And I'll just say, none of us want any educators having guns in our schools ever for any reason. So that's our problem.
Teachers, educators are supposed to be guides. They are not supposed to be guards. And the answer is not to create fortifications that make our schools look like military installations. I am a daughter of the South. I respect the Second Amendment, but I know you can protect the Second Amendment and protect second graders at the same time. And what that requires is, number one, admitting that the laws we have are wrong for Georgia. When guns everywhere, when that law passed that said that you could carry weapons on public school grounds, in public parks, in bars, in restaurants, in grocery stores. We made Georgia less safe, but we still had a few filters to catch the most dangerous people. And Brian Kemp, let's say the name, his criminal carry law removed one of the filters that we were using. More than 11,000 people who were stopped from getting weapons, they were stopped in the last 3 years from getting weapons because that law no longer exists, because that that background check no longer exists. The loophole for gun shows and for private sales is now wide open. Those who commit domestic violence now can get those weapons. And this is not always about illegal weapons. Sometimes it's simply because folks don't know the law. They come from other states. And so Georgia has the responsibility to make certain that we strengthen gun safety laws. This is not about taking anyone's rights away. It's about changing the culture of the state. And right now, the culture of Georgia under this governor is that the only way to survive is to have your own gun. That's the wild, wild west. I watch a lot of gun smoke with my parents in my house. I watch Tales of Wells Fargo. I can do Bonanza, you name it, we watch it. That should not be Georgia in 2022. And so my intention will be to repeal the gun laws that have weakened gun safety in Georgia, to close the loophole so that we join other states that have been able to make their communities safer without vitiating a person's right to the Second Amendment. But it's also about creating space in our schools so that we teach about restorative justice and about de-escalation, and we teach alternatives to violence as a response to crisis. Because our young people are learning what they see, and they need to understand that you don't have to respond to a fight with a weapon, but they don't have the tools, they don't have the resources, and sometimes they've never had the experience of knowing that there's an alternative. And so we've got to see our educational opportunities as more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's also about how do you remedy pain? How do you give people more, especially our youngest people, so that they know there's something else out there? Because two of the components to gun violence that we don't talk about, one is that it's fights that escalate very quickly because these young people don't think that there's any hope. You take a life because you don't think the life matters. And so we have to have educational institutions that not only remind them that their lives matter, but help them understand how to remember it and how to see it. And that's why I'm so bullish about making sure that they understand there's a pathway, that you can have a better life, that you are not trapped in the same cycles that may have encompassed and engulfed your family. You come from a family of educators. We have so many young people who come from families that have never seen education as a way out. I want them to know that this is a pathway because that's what worked for my family. It didn't work for everyone, but even the ones for whom it didn't work, they're still willing to try. But the other part of it is that we have to make certain that when you are on that path, that we are ready to help you if you make a mistake. That is why I know there are a lot of resources are pouring into schools for more school safety officers and school resource officers, but we have to remember that too often when that happens, we start to treat young people like miniature criminals, and that mistakes that you make because of the hormones get treated like mistakes of humanity. And we cannot allow our young people, in response to weakened gun laws and increased gun violence, to be treated like miniature criminals and get distracted from the opportunities they should have to become strong and resilient adults.
Thank you. This next question, actually, we had two of our viewers asked this same question. So it's on our minds. Yes. Okay. How will you rebuff efforts underway to undermine public education, such as diverting public funding to private schools?
I have opposed, and Lisa Morgan can tell you this.
Yes.
I have fought every single bill that has ever been offered to divert public dollars to private education. I served on the board of a private school. I don't oppose private education, but private education is a privilege. Public education is a responsibility. Public education is in our Constitution. And right now, hundreds of millions of dollars get diverted from public education. And then our educators are told we can't afford to pay our ESPs, that we can't afford to resource our classrooms, that we can't afford to hire more counselors. This is a choice that has been made. I will not support the diversion of funds to private education for two reasons. One, because the obligation of the state is public education. And two, because those private schools are permitted to discriminate against the students that they take. That discrimination doesn't have to be malicious. It can be benign, but discrimination is discrimination. Public schools have to take the children who are presented to them, and they therefore are entitled to the resources to do that work. And we are diverting too much money. Now, I will say that as an aside, special education, special needs children do have and should qualify in a separate fashion, because sometimes the needs are so specific that it is not cost effective for a public school to provide it. But those are incredibly narrow situations that should not be exploited, but should be understood. But the tradition that Georgia has built of diverting public school dollars for private use must end, and I will make it my mission. Thank you.
This next question is from Michelle Simmons, a special education teacher. And I'm going to ask the question, but I think on the panel, I want Martisa, who's in the classroom, and I know Sterling special education, but I think this is a problem for everyone, not just special education. How will you address special education teachers who may not get planning time, collaboration time, and have the responsibility of morning and afternoon duties? There's not enough time in the day to plan, teach, and complete administrative responsibilities. I think that's everybody. Yeah. Okay. How can we address this?
One is that we need more educators in the classroom, and we need more ESPs in the school building. One of the reasons planning time is a part of your day is that you cannot do the work that you're asked to do if you don't have time to plan to do it. And if you are doing double and triple duty, I mean, apparently you run the school system. If you've got to do all of those jobs, it is hard to do every job you're given well. And so we have to increase the pay so we can recruit more teachers. I assure you, if we increase pay and we actually right size the responsibilities and we provide real resources, not fake resources that are used to hide the fact that educators aren't given the time they need, then we can get more educators in the classroom. Because there was actually an article in Atlantic magazine I was reading today, and it said that there isn't always a teacher shortage. Sometimes it's simply educators don't want to be in those schools and in those school districts. Georgia has a shortage, but we can solve the shortage by doing what states that don't have shortages are doing. And that is adequately resourcing our educators, giving them planning time, giving them real resources, and giving them authority to actually do their jobs. And then layering on top of that, paying a living wage so we can recruit the ESPs that we need, and that they can also take care of themselves and their families. If we do this work, we can reduce the number of people doing 2 and 3 jobs simply to get through a school day. I don't want to have a conversation about why we are now at 60% or 40% or 20%. We have an opportunity to fully finance education and do our jobs. And it is not a lack of knowledge, it is a lack of intention. And I intend to do right.
Thank you. And we have a bus driver, Aledia Miller, who asked this question. Ms. Abrams, what things will you do for drivers to keep us safe and make our wages better?
One, we need to replace your equipment. We know that that is a major issue. And because of the monies that have come through the state, there is an opportunity to work with local school districts to start replacing fleets. There are real opportunities because of both the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and the surpluses that we have in the state, that we can be more aggressive and intentional about replacing the equipment. Number 2, we have to make certain that you aren't tired because you have 2 or 3 other jobs. We know that schools rely on bus drivers, that they are an essential part. We know that there are school districts right now that are having to delay the start of classes and cancel classes altogether because they can't get kids into the school. And if this is a vital need, then you treat vital needs with intensity and with urgency. And that is why it is so important that we raise pay, that we not only raise wages, but we make certain you have the benefits that should go along with a living wage, that you have the equipment that you need, and that you are treated with the respect you deserve. But that cannot happen if we do not rectify the funding formula, because for so many of, especially of our low wealth districts or for our rural districts, they cannot cover the cost given the current funding formula. Because the state has abdicated its responsibility too frequently, and because of the push to privatize, we now have private companies that are not doing their part. And as governor, I'm going to make certain that public education truly meets the public responsibilities that it has. Not everything can be privatized and made better. Sometimes privatization is just how government decides to abdicate responsibility. And my mission is to say that we are going to do what is right for communities. We're going to do what's right for our bus drivers and our ESPs, and we're going to do, most importantly, what's right for our kids. And that is going to take some money, but we can afford it. If you take nothing else away from what I said tonight, Georgia has existed with a poverty of imagination and a poverty of action. And we've become gaslighted into believing that this is all there is. It's not true. I've done the math. It's the same math I did in 2012 to stop the single largest tax increase in Georgia history. I sat in committee after committee hearing where they put out report after report saying, oh, this tax cut is going to save Georgia taxpayers money. But I'm like, can I see the model that you're using? And it was like asking to see the work. I took it home and I used the exact same numbers, but I rearranged them. And the way they showed it to me, the state was going to see this massive tax cut. But when you rearranged it, it turns out 82% of Georgians were going to pay more money to give the rest of the folks the tax cut. So they were going to ask 82% of Georgians to pay more to create a tax cut for the wealthy. That's the kind of thinking that guides the state right now. We've got to rearrange our thinking. We can afford to write by our school bus drivers, by our ESPs, and by our educators, but you have to have a governor who knows how to do the math and do it right.
And our last question is from Chelsea. How will you address the issue where, due to waivers, paraprofessionals have to do the work of teachers without teacher pay or even support to become a certified teacher?
So I was there when we created the waiver system during the Great Recession. The intention was to say that we needed education to continue, and there really truly was no money, that there was a global collapse of the economy and it was real. That was a long time ago. Unfortunately, those waivers have remained. And I've had this conversation with school board superintendents and with board members. There are some waivers that make sense, but any waivers that help that shift responsibility instead of solving problems are no longer valid waivers. And we need to make certain that school districts aren't using these waivers to cover up for the failure of the state. State government has slashed its investment in education and has shifted so much responsibility to school districts that cannot meet those obligations on their own, that these waivers have become crutches. If we do our part, if the state finally right sizes its economy and its budget, then those waivers are no longer necessary. If you are doing the work, you should get the wages for the work that you do. And if you want to do more, then that should be an option, not an obligation. And that is what we have to have in the next governor. Someone who understands the difference and is willing to tell the truth, that it's going to be more expensive, but it doesn't mean we have to raise taxes. It means we have to change how we do work, and we have to admit that some people are going to get more than others because they need more than others. I grew up in Mississippi. I went to a city school, but every school in Mississippi is basically rural. When I grew up, Gulfport had about 50,000 people. I know that we were so far away from the seat of power that sometimes we were invisible to those who were in power. And my mission is to make certain that no matter who you are, if you are a child of Georgia, we see you. If you are a parent, we hear you. And if you are an educator, we are with you. If we do that work, then these waivers cease to be an excuse to not solve the problems, and they go back to being what they should have been from the beginning, a stopgap measure. But we've got to stop hoping the gap closes, and we've actually got to bridge the gap. And that's what I intend to do if I become the next governor of the great state of Georgia.
Thank you. Just very quickly before you give your closing statement,
Yes.
I'm going to ask Martisa and Sterling. One sentence. What's the most important thing that can change to make public education work for your students?
connectedness.
Time.
Thank you. I wanted to get that in there. And now it is your turn to give us your closing statement.
Well, I first want to say on behalf of every person who isn't in this room but benefits from who you are, thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your investment. Thank you for holding on one more year. Thank you for doing the job of 15 to 27 people, apparently. Thank you for coming back when you can. Thank you for standing up for those who need you. And to all of you who are listening, thank you for who you are. I am running for this job for the second time. The first time it was because I knew what needed to be done, but I wasn't certain if the other people running would do it. Now we know that the promises made have not been kept and that the needs have not been met. And this is not an issue of resources. Georgia can afford to do what's right. But we need leaders who believe that doing what's right is their job. I intend to be a governor for the entire state of Georgia, for one Georgia. But I know at the core of who we are and what we have to accomplish is education. Public education transforms communities. It can either be an anchor or it can be a cement block that drags those communities down. It can lift us up or it can convince us that nothing is possible. And I know that if we do what is right for our public education system, we will be the envy of America. We have a once in a generation opportunity to invest in our young, to take the resources that have been delivered by a federal government that saw COVID as an opportunity to put money back into community. We've got between $5 and $6 billion that we can spend to do what's right as an investment. It's time to put Band-Aids aside and to actually do the work of fixing what is broken. But while we're doing that, we can also build what is great. I say I have a borrowed teenager and I am so proud of who she is, but I want her to have the same opportunities. But I also want anyone who doesn't have me as an aunt or these fine educators or you, I want every child to wake up with the privilege of being a Georgia student and to know that that privilege means that their needs will be met and their futures will be bright. But that means we have to have a governor who spends every single day doing her best to make it so. So I encourage you to stay on this call, to listen to ways you can help, to be engaged in this election. We have got 75 days to change the future of Georgia. But I know it is possible, and I am blessed to be in the company of those who work every day to make it so. Thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for this time.
Thank you. And so thank you all for joining us this evening. And we do have two things to ask of you this evening. We want all of you to go to gae.org/campaigns, gae.org/campaigns. And if you are an educator for Abrams, find our social media shareables and share them so that your social media contacts and your colleagues can see that we are supporting Stacey Abrams and we are educators for governor. Educators for Abrams for governor. Get that all in there. We also want you to look. We want you to go to stacyabrams.com and sign up to volunteer. And for our GAE members, we have a special member program that will be starting this weekend to help engage all of our members to get out the vote. And I'm going to close this, and Stacey doesn't know this, but I stole a line from her 2 years ago that I use everywhere. And this is truly why I know that she will be an educator and governor who will support educators, support our students, and public education. Because she said, and I quote you all the time, I believe in public education because public education believed in me. And all of us as educators believe in our students each and every day. And we believe that they can succeed. And we need a governor that believes in us the same way. And that is Stacey Abrams. Thank you for joining us this evening. And you all have a great evening. Please remember, post your social media, sign up to volunteer, and let's elect a governor who will support public education each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Please do not leave. We have one more thing we would like for you to do. I'm going to turn it over to Jillian and IJ, who are our digital organizers.
Hi guys, my name's IJ. I put in the chat a little earlier that I'm a digital organizer with the team. I am a Spelman woman as well, and it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I'm sure you've seen in the chat that we were telling you to volunteer. So that is what we want you guys to do. Jillian and I have dropped in there the chat to Google form where you can schedule yourself to volunteer, and it'll look like this. It's really simple, so please fill it out. I know educators are for Leader Abrams, and we need educators to volunteer when you guys have times. We have plenty of things to do, such as phone banking, texting your friends, emailing them, and we even have a Monday call every Monday at 5:30 where we update you guys here at the campaign that you can also sign up for. And all you do is listen for 30 minutes, and we let you guys know where Leader Abrams will be, some insiders of the campaign, volunteer opportunities, and everything like that. So that's what we need you to do. So Jillian is dropping that form in there, and we need you to fill it out because we need you. We cannot do this without you guys. There are 76 days left, and Stacey needs you. Also, Jillian can explain to you guys how to download the Impactive app. So please get on this app. So we're going to let you guys know how to do it right now.
Hey everyone, so my name is Jillian. I am also a digital organizer with the campaign. I am also an Emory University alum, a very proud Georgian College student as well. And I'm so happy to be with you today. So IJ is gonna put up a little slide deck that's gonna show us exactly how to download Impactive. So we put 2 links in the chat for you guys. So they are available either to download on your mobile phone or your desktop. Either are acceptable. And once you download that, you will be prompted with a campaign code. So the Team Abrams campaign code is 938911. And so while you guys are doing that, I can explain what exactly Impactive is while you're downloading it. So IJ and I both included this in the chat, but just to reiterate, Impactive is our one-stop shop, if you will. And so we phone bank through this app. We also text our friends through this app. And we also have a lot of resources that are very helpful as voting is just around the corner. Since we were able to request our absentee ballots August 22nd, which is this past Monday, there are resources on this app that you can check your voter registration and also send it to your friends who may not know these important deadlines and information. Additionally, you can buy merch on this as well and also watch some of Leader Abrams' really great video explainers, such as her most recent one on Medicaid Expansion. So in order to download this, you can also scan the QR code that is on the screen as well. And by actually downloading this onto your phone, you're able to stay in the loop with what's going on our campaign and also volunteer with us. We'd be so happy you guys here with us today. As Solomon, one of our great volunteers in the chat said, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. We have 75 days left until the election. There is so much urgency on the line here. As Leader Abrams so eloquently said, this is for our educators, and we are so excited to have you a part of our team today. Ajay, you're muted.
Sorry. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat about how to get on Impactive, or if you have any questions about the Google form, please let us know. Please get all of your friends to volunteer with us. A voter registration drive. We have a lot of plans for Get Out the Vote. So that's our GOTV time. So we definitely have plans to do that and a lot of more fun, exciting things. So we need you to fill out that form, Robert, because you also can put suggestions and stuff like that of what you would like the campaign to do on that volunteer form. Thank you. Yes, guys. So please fill out that form. We need you. Please, please, please.
Additionally, I just wanted to add one more thing. If anybody has any questions on how to download this app, we do a session every Saturday and Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. that Ajay and I both lead as to how to learn the ins and outs of this application. I know we're explaining it kind of quickly, but if you guys have any further questions, you are more than welcome to join us on those 3 to 4 sessions on the weekends, and we can go into more depth about how this application actually works.
Nikia, so you can put in the notes that form. So this upcoming Monday, we won't be having one because we're offline. But so this schedule, the volunteer form that we sent is only for the end of August, but all of these events are every week. So after the Wednesday, it'll be the same events on Thursday, Friday, et cetera, till the end of the campaign. And even closer to the end of the campaign, we'll have them even more. So on Monday, you can just put in the notes that you'd like to join that Monday call so that we can get you on there for the following Monday, not this upcoming Monday, but the first Monday in September. We will be back and we'll be ready to let you guys know what we have going on.
I really do recommend those Monday calls. If for some reason you have a very busy schedule and you need to carve out one thing, that is an extremely impactful way, ironically, since our app is called Impactive, to actually get involved with our campaign. It's led by a lot of our staffers, and they go into depth about keeping us in the loop on the campaign, what's going on the ground, and how you can get involved. This last Monday, we had Liza Conrad, one of our voter protection team members, discuss all of the ins and outs of voting this upcoming cycle. And there will be many more special guests and information to come.
Yes, we've had Lauren Growago on there before, our campaign manager. We've had Leader Abrams pop on. So you never know who will hop on, and that's why we need you guys there. And I got your information, Nikia. I'll definitely make sure you are on that call when we have it. Oh, and it's also a good way to suggest or ask any questions, just like this time where you guys were able to ask questions and stuff. That is what that Monday call is for as well.
And just to quickly detail some of the other events we have before we let you guys go, we have phone banking, which many of you may have done already in prior campaigns. We do phone banking through this app, and our goal is to call Georgian voters to mobilize them and have them turn out for Leader Abrams. Additionally, we have a text bank, but this text bank may be different than ones you've done before. This text bank is actually texting people we know. So we're not given a list of voters, we actually text our own networks. And our main goal is to mobilize people that we know in our life to make sure they get out the vote for Leader Abrams. And additionally, we have just recently launched 2 teams that have to do with emails and social media as well. So if you guys are interested in any of those digital options as well, we definitely have a place for you.
I got your number as Celeste, and I'll definitely get you down for that Monday call. And then also, just so we can have it in the back end, what you can do also, because that Monday call isn't listed, you can put in the notes, want to join the Monday call so that we can schedule you out for the future. Thank you, Felicia.
Thank you.
Our wonderful manager is putting in there the information on the Google Doc. I encourage all of you guys to join. It's an amazing way to get involved. You have amazing conversations with people. I know a lot of you guys are educators, so I know you enjoy being able to talk to people and things like that. And phone banking is a great way to do so. We talk about our constituent service team, which is the first program ever on a campaign. We are the first ever campaign to have a constituent service team. So a group of social workers who are actively giving Georgians resources every day and helping them with whatever they need, whether it be food stamps, help with their bills, resources of any means. We are here to help provide them with that. And so on the phone bank, you also tell people about that. You ask them if they need help, because here at the campaign, our motto is, how can we help? So please sign up for phone banking or even emailing, texting. Like Jillian said, it is so fun. You really can like text your friends. If you're not into cold calling, you can do the text your friends or the social media. I'm someone who loves social media. I'm Gen Z. I love TikTok, Instagram, but my grandmother loves Facebook, things like that. So if you love to get out the word about policy and things like that, social media is for you. Every week we have a different policy that we uplift on social media. So that is a way for you to get involved if you want to do something chill. All these events are very low. They range from low commitment to high. You can do 30 minutes. You can do 2 hours. You can do twice a week. You can do once every 2 weeks, whatever you like. But we recommend that if you can join us for 2 times a week, because it is only 75 days left until the election. And we really 76 days until the election, and we need you. If you commit to 2 times a week, all the way to November the 8th, that will only be around 17 to 20 hours. And that is not a lot of time. We know that it's crunch time. We want to change history. I want my hand in changing history. And if all I have to do is commit to 17 hours all the way to November the 8th, I am going to sign up, and I'm going to do so. And I'm sure a lot of you guys can agree with me. So we definitely want you to sign up. Please, please, please do so. There's so many fun events, and I know you guys will enjoy them.
The last quick thing I want to add is that our manager Felicia put in the chat a social media post that you guys are free to post on your social media talking about the event that we just heard. So whether you guys are Facebook users, Twitter users, Instagram, etc., it doesn't matter. These are great ways to get other people to come to our events and understand just what Leader Abrams can do for Georgians. So nice to meet you guys.
Hi, thank you. Nice meeting you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're gonna be on here chilling, hoping that you guys fill up the volunteer form. So I'm really excited to see a lot of you guys in the upcoming weeks. Like we said, there are 76 days left. It is crunch time. After Labor Day, this is gonna fly through, and we need everyone. So I'm so excited to have you. Thank you.